Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. Sid, you say that, but originally the website was called Maximum Geeks. It was called Maximum Geeks for about 2 weeks, and I hated the name. So I was like, oh, what can I do? What can I change it to? So I shortened the name. I shortened it from Maximum Geeks to Maxi Geeks. So you are very, very spot on there. Today is Friday, June 24th, and this is episode number 24 of the Maxi-Geek Show. It has been a very, very quiet week this week, as opposed to the last few. There was one showcase, that happened overnight. It was builders having many things in it, but it only had one thing in it. One thing for, 9 hours, but it had one thing. We will get into that in a little bit as well. Due to the sort of lack of big news, we're not going to deep dive into 100 things. I've got like 7 things we're going to talk about, including the new PlayStation Plus program, which is launched here in Australia, launched here yesterday, and we'll go through some of the games for that. But first things first, we're going to talk about LEGO and the fact that the very first LEGO Con is coming to Australia. So LEGO Con started last year. It was a digital event, and they just hosted one last weekend as well. And it is basically a chance for the LEGO company to talk about and showcase off all their things. The one from the weekend, they showed off like Cad Bane's gunship from Star Wars, the 90th anniversary for the castle. So the castle with the knights that were sort of a big hit, in the 80s. So the new anniversary edition of that. They talked about some of the video games. We got a teaser for the new Lego Star Wars short. So it was all things Lego, and it was all digital. But this coming July, there'll be the first ever physical Lego Con, and it's taking place in Sydney at the Sydney Showgrounds. The best thing about this is tickets are completely free. There is no cost to anyone to attend it. Obviously, if you're driving and parking, there are costs there. LEGO aren't paying for that. But in terms of getting into the venue, there are no costs associated. What is different though is it's across 2 days, but it's not 2 days worth of content. They're essentially saying you've got 2 hours at a time to go in. If you want to go for 4 hours, you need tickets for the 2 sessions back to back, so to speak. Once the 2 hour block is done, everyone gets kicked out, they clean up, people get a chance to go to the toilet and all that sort of stuff, working the booths, and then the next lot come in half an hour later. 2 sessions though, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m, both Saturday and Sunday, are being billed as what they call low sensory sessions. So the volume on all the displays will be turned down, the brightness of things will be turned down, just so that children or adults with sensory issues can still go and enjoy it and not feel overwhelmed. We know that the McLaren F1 Lego car that was at the Australian Grand Prix back in March, April, whenever that was, that'll be there for people to go and actually sit in and take photos with. This will be the last time it's in Australia before it ships off to another Grand Prix location around the world. What else have I got here? They're doing builder challenges, so the Lego Master Builders stuff will be there as well. As I said, 90 years of Lego that they're celebrating as well this year. I said tickets are completely free. So there are 4 sessions each day, 8:30 to 10:30, 11 to 1, which is the low sensory one, 1:30 to 3:30, and then 4 to 6 p.m. I personally think it's a fantastic thing that they're doing, that they're bringing the show, off the screen and into the real world, because Lego is, it is a physical medium. If you want digital Lego, obviously there are 1,000 Lego games around. There's also Minecraft, which is very much a digital Lego. So there's definitely a lot to do in the digital space with Lego already. So having a physical thing is very, very cool. It does sort of surprise me that it's in Sydney. Lego Australia is based in Sydney, and all their PR is in Sydney, so it makes sense. But the biggest Lego thing is in Melbourne, so it's a little weird that they're not sort of tying it into that centre. But hey, it's definitely the first time that they're doing this, so who knows? It could be something that they rotate around the country, to welcome people from all over the place. I think it is very, very cool. I won't be going because I think it's a very, very long way to go for me for 2 hours of checking out some Lego. But I know a few people that are very keen on attending, and they will be there, on the Saturday. Moving on to things that you can do anywhere, we finally have a release date for No Man's Sky on Switch. So No Man's Sky for Switch was announced back in February during the Nintendo Direct then, and they did announce it as a winter release, so sometime between June 1st to August 31st. However, during the reveal overnight for when it's dated, they actually needed a bit more time, so it will be releasing on October 7th for Switch. Interestingly, on October 7th, the same day, it will also get a physical release. So many people just assumed this would be a digital-only platform, a digital-only release, but it's actually going to have a physical release on the same day. And the PlayStation 5 edition, which is already available digitally, will be available physically on the same day. We did actually get some, new footage of the game in motion, and I'll play this one here. Let me just mute it because we don't need to see it. So this is a native port. This isn't a cloud-based game like many may have assumed, when this was first announced. This is fully native on Switch. It's running on the Switch. So the big thing with No Man's Sky is it's all procedurally generated. So, you can spend, 10 hours on a single planet, and the game doesn't have to worry about what, the next planet over is doing. And if you've never been to that planet before, it doesn't have to worry about anything, beyond that. So it does a lot in terms of, generating content as it needs to, which I think is probably going to help it out in the performance space. In terms of visuals, the game is looking, pretty spectacular for the Switch. Interestingly, the screenshots that were provided by Bandai Namco, who are doing the distribution for the game here in Australia, New Zealand, and throughout Europe, they were 4K, size-wise. So maybe not in terms of content detail, but in terms of the actual resolution, they were 4K screens. So it's very, very interesting that they're doing it that way. So again, I think it looks great. I've been playing No Man's Sky, on and off for the past 6 years. Every time they release a big update, I jump back in and see what's going on. This will launch with all the content, so it's not going to be just the base game and that they'll add content as they go. This will be all the expansions. So the Sentinels expansion from earlier in this year, I've forgotten the names of them now. There've been 3 expansions this year, so there's been 20 major content drops for the game over the past 6 years. Some added base building, some added mechs, some the one early this year, the Sentinels overhauled the Sentinels. So they're not just annoying little droids that fly around and shoot at you if you blow up the planet. So there's a lot more stuff that they've got going to it. But yeah, so all of that will be in the game, on release day, and then going forward, whenever there's a new piece of content, being added to the game for whatever, if it's a small little update or if it's a major expansion, all those things will be on Switch day one, same as they will be on the other platforms, which I think is cool. The only thing that they've not said anything about will be save file transfers. We've seen a lot of Switch games do it for Steam, where you can download your Steam file save to Switch, and some of them let you upload it again, some of them do not, unfortunately. But we've had a few of them over the years do that, and I'd love to see this happen here. Strangely enough, even though I have the game on PC, I tend to play it more on Xbox, so I don't really have a save file to transfer from the PC, so it doesn't really help me in the long run, but it is something that I'd love to see them do for it. Moving on to the world of Warcraft, strangely enough, we have details about the pending release. And when I say details about the pending release, what I'm specifically referring to is the contents of the various editions. At this stage, the game still does not, the expansion does not have a release date. However, Blizzard have committed to it releasing in 2022. Beyond that window, we don't actually know when it's coming. but we know now at least what the various editions will contain. So there are 3 digital versions of the game that players can obtain. The base version, which is just the expansion, and then the levels go up from there depending on what extra content you want. We actually do have the breakdown here on the site. So it's $60 Australian, rounding up to 5 cents. It gets you the expansion, a pet, and the new race. The Heroic Edition is $90, so an extra $30. Again, it gets you all the base level content. This is the one to get if you're coming in or you don't have a character up, because it does give you a level 60 character boost. You also get a flying mount and another pet. And then the Epic Edition contains everything from the previous 2 editions, as well as Time Walker's Hearthstone effect, the Diadem of Spellkeeper head slot transmorg ability, the Wings of Awakening backslot transmorg in 5 colors, and 30 days of game time. That one is $120. I don't like the fact that they've sort of locked the ability to modify your character's visual appearance behind essentially a $60 add-on from the expansion. I think that's a little nickel and dimey, but many people have had their characters for years, and I don't think they care too much about how they look at this point. This is the official box art for the big collector's edition for Dragonflight. It is one of those things we had it with Burning Crusade, Shadowlands, all the various others over the years, where they've had this sort of big thick box. In terms of the content that comes with it, you get all the digital content we've already mentioned, as well as a mouse pad, some pins, and an art book. The interesting thing is this is $180, so it is $60 more than the digital only Epic Edition. So the Epic Digital, the Epic Edition, the digital version is $120. The Collector's Epic Edition is $180. I think it's a very cool thing because they're still doing it. They're still doing a big box release. Warcraft, World of Warcraft is 20 years old now, coming up on 20 years, and they're still doing these massive, expansions, and they're still doing the big box releases, which, not many games do that. Obviously, you're not getting a disc in the box; that is long gone. But even games like, Fallout 76 was just a generic, from Bethesda was just a generic, DVD case. Destiny obviously has a big thing on PC, that was just generic DVD cases as well. So there's very few places doing this sort of big box release now for PC games. So it's nice to see that they're still doing it. As I said, we don't know when this is all coming out, but we do know that it is coming out later this year. Something we do actually have a release date for is A Plague Tale Requiem. So this was a showcase that happened overnight. So Focus Entertainment, previously Focus Home Entertainment, announced a couple of weeks ago that they would be hosting their own showcase, and it would feature A Plague Tale Requiem, which is the sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence. The problem that I have with this, before we get into the actual game coverage, is that their showcase was nearly 8 hours in length. 7.5 of those hours were just atmospheric things, just images from the game with music playing over it, and then a 10-minute trailer of the game in action, and that was it. When they said they were hosting a showcase, they didn't say it was a Plague Tale showcase. They said it was a Focus Entertainment showcase. So many people, myself included, assumed that they would be talking about other games that they're publishing, like Space Marine 2, or the recent PC recently got Hard Space Shipbreaker. I can never get that order right, which is still coming to consoles. There was also, the recently announced Aliens Dark Descent, which is the top-down isometric shooter that was announced during the PC Gaming Show. So they already have a lot of games coming, and when they said, "Hey, we're doing a showcase, it will feature A Plague Tale Requiem," many people just thought, "Oh, cool, we're going to get details on this game, but it's still going to be others." That was not the case. They literally just did the one thing, the one game, 7.5 hours of atmospheric building, and then, the presentation itself. What is interesting though is the presentation consists of a roughly 10.5 minute gameplay video, which For, copyright stuff and all that, I will not play here, but I will post it in the chat. After the end of the video, we got the release date. So the game is coming on October 18th for PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Not that we will have it here, but it is also being launched onto Nintendo Switch on that day via the cloud. So if you have a Switch and you don't have the others, and you live in a country where cloud gaming on Switch does work, you can get the game there as well. We do have a Plague Tale Innocence on Switch as well via that same method, and it ran very, very smoothly for regions that supported the cloud feature, which Australia does not yet, unfortunately. So I suspect this one will work just as well. On October 18th, though, if you have an Xbox Series X or S or PC and you're a member of either Xbox Game Pass, PC Game Pass, or Xbox Games, Xbox Live Ultimate, you will get access to this game as part of that membership, depending on the platform you're electing to be on. Obviously, if you have Xbox Game Pass and you're on a PC, you don't get the game. You have to have the PC Game Pass or the Ultimate Edition. Beyond that, there is also a Collector's Edition statue, which I will throw the trailer on here while we see the actual resin statue. Unfortunately, the Focus store, the worldwide version of the store, so they have a US specific version, an English or a UK specific version, and a Europe specific site, and then a worldwide variant. The worldwide variant doesn't have this listed at the time of us recording. It may in the future, but at the moment it doesn't. This is $180 US to get this big collector's edition. Obviously, it does not get you the cloud version of the Switch game. So if you want this particular thing and you have the Switch, you're also going to get the game on one of the other platforms. It's just the way it works. But it is a 21 centimeter tall statue. You'll also get Hugo's feather brooch, which is a metal brooch inspired by the feather ornament worn by Hugo. A really weird vinyl record. They say it's a official soundtrack, but it only contains 2 tracks. So it's not really a soundtrack as it is a CD sampler, which we've had plenty of games that have done that. Plenty of records have done that in the past where it's only 1 or 2 songs on it. It just seems a bit weird to be calling it a soundtrack and not actually have the full soundtrack available. It will also come with a bunch of lithographs and sort of essentially a little poster as well. And then of course the game on the various platforms. So it is very, very cool that this now has a release date. I know many people have been chomping at the bit for hands-on with this particular one because it is something that they're very, very into. Obviously, how it all plays out, we'll have to wait and see. A Plague Tale Innocence was a fantastic game. They didn't really use the rats to an effect in combat, outside of busting lights and things like that. They seem to have taken that into consideration because a lot of people wanted you to be able to throw enemies into the various rats, the various bits of rats around the place. But yeah, I remember seeing Innocence before it even had that. It was just called A Plague Tale when it first showed up at E3. I want to say 2014, I think it was. So it's been a while since I first saw this series, and they just keep going from strength to strength. And you have to remember too, Asobo, who are developing this, while they've been developing this game, the studio's also been creating content and developing Microsoft Flight Simulator. So they're doing that big thing from Microsoft. They've been doing that for years and still releasing world updates every couple of months, and there's developing this alongside it. So they've been very, very busy over there in their studio. They were some 15, 16 people when they started. They're now close to 300, so they've definitely got the people behind it, and we'll have to when this one does release, I guess people will either be happy or sad about it. But I think given their history and their pedigree, this is definitely going to be one that people will enjoy. Speaking of enjoyment, things are a little weird over at SEGA and Creative Assembly. During the week, out of nowhere, SEGA started teasing a new game reveal. Now, SEGA, this is the big anniversary year for Sonic. and Sonic Frontiers hasn't exactly set the world on fire. So many people thought this was going to be something Sonic related, and then it came out that Creative Assembly were behind things. Now, Creative Assembly is a studio you probably don't know by name, but you will know what they work on, and that is primarily they work on the Total War series. So already this year we've had Total War Warhammer 3, and a bunch of content for that is released from them. And then last year we also had Total War Troy, which was free for like 24 hours on the Epic Games Store. So the studio's been very, very busy putting out some, Total War content. And it seems they were being very sneaky because they also announced Hyenas, which is a new team-based shooter looter game. So the reason why this is something to pay attention to is not because the team that make Total War are making a shooter, is that this is also the team, Creative Assembly, this is the team that made Alien Isolation, which is perhaps the best Alien game ever made. And I know we just mentioned that there's a new one coming from Focus. They also have Fireteam Elite, which has got a big expansion coming as well. There's definitely a lot of Aliens games around. We will not mention the one from Gearbox, that was not worth it. But there's been a lot of games over the years. But Alien Isolation was the only real game, that put you inside the sort of the movie experience and let you feel, the fear and the panic of being chased down by a xenomorph. So the team that focused on that are now focusing on this shooting experience. And I say shooting experience, and it's probably just because it's the quickest way to try and get people's heads around what it is. The basic story, the basic gist of this game is that the billionaires have left the planet, gone off to Mars, as they apparently are wanting to do in the real world. However, in their race to space, they didn't consider the ramifications of their constant testing and technology improvements on the planet, and it left Earth broken, which you can see here in the screenshot. There's giant chunks of the planet missing. The planet is essentially cracked in half. Think of it as a Pokeball. It's a big sphere, they've opened it up. But what they fail to do when they, in their eagerness to escape the planet, is bring with them all the things they enjoy. So there's a bit of a not an economy, but a trading zone of people heading to Earth or objects around orbit of Earth, and reclaiming them for the thing. So essentially, think of it as Peter Quill's Walkman. That's a very rare Earth thing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and people always seem to love it. So that is essentially what it is. But the reason why I say it's a shooter is because it's a team shooter. It's a team-based shooter, and it's a 3v3 v3 v3 v3. So it's 15 players, 5 teams of 3, battling it out. So let me pop on this reveal trailer here while we talk about it a bit. The thing that obviously, you'll see it straight away, it looks unlike very few games around. It is stylish as heck. I kind of get like, if Sega made a new Jet Set Radio, this is kind of what I think the visuals would look like, in the modern gaming landscape. It's got this like comic effect, but it's not just it's not like a Marvel or a DC comic. It's like, Joe's comics, most people would have never seen. Into the Spider-Verse has a very similar look to some of its action as well. So I think this is very much the same. And as you're seeing here, there's a lot of stuff they're floating around in gravity. That's because, the planet's being cracked in half. So the gravity is all sorts of foobarred. So this isn't, just the remnants of Earth. It's, Earth broken. So as you can see, you saw a Sonic thing there. There's a bit of, some other classic SEGA items, and even some non-SEGA items, hiding around the place. So it's one of these things where it's something that's it's going to live and die by its player base. It's not being built as a what's the best way to describe it? It's not being built as a solo experience. It's definitely being built as a team experience. So there's a statement here from the producer of the game, David Nichols. David Nicholson, where there's actually an alpha. They're running an alpha on PC in the USA and in parts of Europe very soon. So unfortunately, we don't get to take part in it down here because of the lack of local servers for it. But they want people to start playing it already because they know as a shooter, as a new shooter, they need people to get in and start experiencing what this game is all about, and actually then having people ready to play it and talk about it. So I think it looks very cool. As I said, like it's definitely got this weird comic thing going here. You can see in the background the texture work on this I assume is an air duct. It's got the dots, which very very big in the 40s and 50s in comics. You can see it here. You can see all these different lines and that to sort of give everything a different style of texture. Even the door, it's not just one color with where they cut through it. It's different textures to make up what this door looks like in this world. We can also see here Ai in his monkey ball. There's a few other items here as well from various SEGA things around the years. So I'm not convinced on it yet because again, it's one of those things where you really have to play it in order to see exactly what it's going to be about, because it is definitely something new. We've had a few games lately where shooting in 0G has become it's one of their things, but they're either solo experiences or they're just standard team death matches. So how all this plays out, we'll have to wait and see, but it does look they are shaping things up to be pretty special. As I said, time will tell on this one, but given the pedigree of the developer, especially with their Total War series, essentially each entry in that series, they just keep going from strength to strength. And then obviously the Alien Isolation, which it's on Switch and it got ported last year to mobile phone by Feral Interactive. So that game is now on every platform, and if you haven't played it, you're definitely missing out. Right, moving on from the world of hyenas to the world of Ionos, and that is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 time. So Xenoblade Chronicles 3 had a Nintendo Direct happen yesterday. So all these people that were saying that a Nintendo Direct was happening this month, you were right, here it is. If you're complaining now that that's not what you meant, you didn't specify, so you lose. But this Direct was roughly 20 minutes in length, and it was all about the upcoming RPG from Monolith Software. Not to be confused with Monolith Productions, who are the Warner Brothers studio working on the Wonder Woman game. We have this, I'm very, very guilty of it myself, but we always get confused with Avalanche Software and Avalanche Studios. So Avalanche Software are the folks that did, they do Just Cause, they did the Mad Max game for Warner Brothers, they did Rage 2 for Bethesda, Generation Zero was theirs as well. So they and they're working on Contraband, right? That's Avalanche Studios. Avalanche Software, the former Disney Infinity developers who have been working on Hogwarts Legacy for a number of years. So this is the same thing. Monolith Software is the RPG maker that Nintendo own. Monolith Productions are the Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor developer, and they're currently now working on a Wonder Woman game. So yeah, just to sort of keep those things separate, that's what they all are. The Direct, however, as I said, was about 20 minutes in length, and it did deal out a good bit of information about the game. There is a new trailer here. It is very story heavy, so I will not play it just in case people want to avoid spoilers. It does go for 3.5 minutes, so it is a fairly lengthy trailer. But what it did confirm is that this game will actually connect to Xenoblade Chronicles and Xenoblade Chronicles 2. How it all connects, that's beyond me. I'm not a big fan of the series. I'm not not super in on it, so it's all very, very new for me. But it's one of those things that if you're around, if you've been around for all the games, this ties into those. As I said, the world where this game is set in is called Ionos, so AIONIOS. And essentially, it consists of two warring factions because it's an RPG that has to have warring factions. The general gist of the story is that your character is from one faction, and with a few of your fellow compatriots, you get forced to join up with members of the opposing faction in order to stop a calamity. So it's the whole, oh my god, you've got to work with your enemy, rah, rah, rah. So that's sort of the baseline thing for what's going on in the game. But the big news, obviously, so the game is out in essentially a month's time on July 29th, is that the game will also get 4 waves of DLC content post-release. So one of them is actually set to launch on the launch day, and it's nothing special. It's some items and color variations of existing outfits. Nothing all that shiny. By the end of the year, there will be a new wave of content that will add a challenge battle mode, a new hero character with quests for them, and more outfits. We've seen the outfits that these guys have done in the past. Essentially, if your character's a female character, get ready for bikinis. That's what they tend to do. So I don't think anything's going to be too different here. By the end of April next year, there will be again more DLC. Essentially it's the same thing from the second wave, just going to be more of the same. But the 4th wave will be by the end of next year. Now, they're not saying the end of next year because it will be the 31st. They just don't have a date yet. But it will be in the later half of next year. I think, if they released it on the 29th of July 2023, that would be, very cool. But that doesn't seem to be the case. They're not sure yet. But this is going to be a story expansion. So much like the Torna DLC was for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, this is going to be the same sort of thing for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I don't mean it's going to be a standalone thing. You don't need to have Chronicles 3 for it. I just mean in terms of what it's offering, it's going to be offering a big story expansion. We also learnt that the game will support Amiibo. So you can tap any Amiibo to it and receive some in-game items. It might be food, might be potions, things to help you out. And if you tap a Shulk Amiibo, which is the one from Smash Brothers, that will give you the Monado, which was the blade that Shulk, had equipped in the original Xenoblade Chronicles. That'll let your character, if you choose to use them as a swordsman, have that particular weapon available to them. I did put it here, Nintendo released 177 new screenshots from the game. I have not put in all 177 because that is just too many, but we have them in here as well for people to check out if they want to. Again, I'm not a big Xenoblade Chronicles fan. It's never been my thing. I struggle with JRPGs, mostly because they all tend to be very, very linear in their story. And I don't mean linear in terms of it's go from point A to point B to point C, but it's always the same. They try to set things up, and then there's always a character that does something because they've been manipulated. There's always somebody that dies to try and spur the hero, and they always tend to follow the same beats over and over again. And it never just appeals to me. And then on the gameplay side of things, for many, many years, they were very, grindy. Lately, especially like Final Fantasy's gotten away from that sort of style of game. But there's been, very many other RPGs that have not. So, again, I do play them. I have them all. They're just not my, I'm not up there in terms of all the information about the series. So, again, I'll pop the story here in the chat if you want to give that a watch, because as I said, it does contain, some very big information for fans. Again, though, it is, they do talk on story and characters, so there are some reveals in there that if you don't want to be spoiled on anything, obviously don't watch it. But if it's something that you're keen on, you can give it a go now. Right, moving on, we have finally received access to PlayStation Plus, the enhanced PlayStation Plus. So the service started rolling out earlier in the year. Well, I'd say earlier in the year. It started rolling out last month in parts of Asia. Then on the 1st of June, it rolled out in Japan. Then a few days later, it rolled out in the US, and now Europe, which apparently includes Australia and New Zealand, which, you can't get any further away from Europe than Australia and New Zealand, but sure, we're a part of them. It's now available here for us to enjoy as well. As always, the PlayStation Plus program, if you will, has been overhauled. So there are now 3 tiers. The tier that everyone's been on for years has now been rebranded to PlayStation Plus Essential. There is no cost difference. It is still the same, $80 a year for that one. It will not. Let me rephrase it. PlayStation said it's not going to change. The value is still going to be the same. Now they keep saying that you'll get 2 free games a month. At the moment, we've been getting 3. 1 PS5 and 2 PS4 games. We've been having that since the PlayStation 5 launched. Whether or not that's going to be the case, they're just saying 2. Who knows? But there's 2 games going forward, according to the information. And then there's the deluxe and the premium plans, and they offer slightly different things depending on what you're after. So the PlayStation Plus Extra, I keep calling it premium. It's called Extra. That includes everything from PlayStation Plus Essential, so your online membership, so your ability to play games online outside of free-to-play, cloud saves, discounts, all that sort of stuff, and your 2 free monthly games. But it also includes access to a library of up to eventually 400 PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games, along with Ubisoft Plus access. Now, when I say up to 400, that is what Sony is saying. There are not 400 games on there from day dot. There's a selection. I looked at it earlier. It's about 60 or 70 games, but more will be added over time. So very much like the Nintendo Switch Online service, they're going to keep adding more to it, over the months and months. So if you're not convinced yet to jump on board because there's not enough games, in time there will be some there. The cost for this one, unfortunately, is quite a bit more. So we're going from either $12 a month for the basic plan, the essential, up to $19 a month. $18.95. I'm rounding it up. Or you go from $80 a year to $135 a year. So to access this library of additional games, much like Xbox Game Pass, we're paying an extra $55 a year. That is similar to what it is for Xbox Game Pass from just standard Xbox Live Gold, or what used to be Xbox Live Gold, to Xbox Game Pass. You're adding an extra sort of $6 a month on, so dollar to dollar wise, it does line up with them. If, however, you want everything at least for Australia and New Zealand, that is where the deluxe plan comes in. So again, if we're just talking yearly prices, you've got $80 for the essentials, the basic plan, $135 for the extra plan, which is that library of games for PS4 and PS5, or $155 for the everything plan, or what they call the deluxe. Now, this one is cheaper. So if you were to do a dollar-to-dollar comparison, the actual amount this one is up by on the extra plan here in Australia and New Zealand is actually a lot less than it is in, say, the US. That's because in the USA they have PlayStation 3 games as part of the lineup, whereas we don't have that here at this point, at this time. The reason why we don't have it is because the PlayStation 3 titles are all cloud streaming, which Sony have been doing in the US and a few other countries via what they call PlayStation Now, which was essentially Game Pass before Game Pass was around. But they were doing it as part of that infrastructure, which is not available down here, so we don't have the PlayStation 3 games. What we do have, though, is access to the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 library that you get as part of the extra membership. But in addition, there's a selection of PS1, PS2, and PlayStation Portable games as well. There's the other benefit is there are also trials. So you can jump on, one of the ones that is up there now is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So you can download a trial of that game, and if you like it, buy it with a bit of a discount. This is not going to be, not every game is going to get a trial. The trial lengths will differ from game to game. Much like, not every game from PlayStation is going to end up in the library of 400 titles. The Spider-Man games are in there now. Returnal, which launched last year, is in there. But, Gran Turismo 7, Forza Horizon Forbidden West is not in there. God of War Ragnarok is likely not to be in there as well. So, as I said, there is a lot there in terms of, the quality of games, it's really going to depend on what you're looking for, from it. So the deluxe library is the one that includes all the generations of PlayStation except PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita, but it does include a bunch of other things. What you need to consider is that some of the games in the library are PS4, PS5 games they're included in the PlayStation Plus collection. So if you're a PlayStation 5 owner, you probably already have some of these games. And some of them have been given out as PlayStation Plus membership titles, before as well. So you're not exactly getting, a bunch of all new titles that we've never seen on the service before. Some of them we definitely have, a bunch of them, I already own, either through PlayStation Plus or, reviewing them over the years. So it's not as if you're getting everything. So if you are, a dedicated gamer, you're getting a lot of gaming done. Some of these games may not be, appealing to you. They may already exist in your library or on other platforms in the libraries there. So just something to be aware of. In terms of the PlayStation Deluxe offerings, and the PlayStation Deluxe is against all the PS1, PS2 games, that is where the value is going to come in, because this is where PlayStation can eventually, and I have to stress eventually, start to leverage their back catalogue. So a game like Siphon Filter had a lot of titles over the years. On the PlayStation 1 there was the PS2 game as well, and then there was even the studio that's Ben's studio. They did Days Gone. They also did the I can't think of the name of it now, SOCOM, which was the online squad-based shooter one that used the PlayStation Network adapter. But in the space of essentially 3 years, we got 3 PS1 games for Siphon Filter. Siphon Filter, Siphon Filter 2, Siphon Filter 3. Not very original names, but they were fantastic games. Then we had a couple of years of a break, and then on PS2 they came back with Siphon Filter, the Amiga strain, then Dark Mirror, which also launched on the PSP, and then we got the PSP exclusive in 2007 of Logan's Shadow, which is actually a sequel to Dark Mirror. They're all technically sequels, but this is like a direct sequel. So the Siphon Filter, there's only one. There's 6 games in the series, but there's only one on there at the moment. The rest of them will come on there eventually at some point. But Tekken 2 is on there. Tekken 2 is probably one of the most popular Tekken series entries, especially from older players. But then there's weird things like the Star Wars collection of games. So when I say Star Wars collection, what I mean is that a number of years ago when Star Wars Battlefront first released, the first one, not the sequel, and this is the reboot obviously, they aligned with PlayStation for marketing. So what they did is they went to PlayStation and said, hey, we're bringing this game, this is what we've got to offer. And PlayStation said, hey, that's great, let us make a console. So they released the PlayStation 4 Pro Star Wars Battlefront Edition, and essentially what it is it has like the iconography of the Rebels, the Empire, and there's something else, I think it's just some stripes in the middle, but it has like Star Wars etched all over it. The controller has Star Wars and some colours and all that sort of stuff, so it's very thematic for what it was. But one of the big sort of things for people to get excited for was that as part of buying this console, which I have, you would get a bunch of codes for some PS2 games that were being remastered for PlayStation 4. And when I say remastered, you have to really, these are not full remasters, essentially just enhanced ports. They were brought across to the platform, made to work, and a few things were fixed, right? But they didn't sharpen up all the textures across the board. The games do look better in places, but not necessarily all the way. So Star Wars Racer's Revenge, which was the poorly received sequel to Episode 1 Racer, or the spin-off from that, I should say. Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which is the game that sort of showed how Jango Fett fell into being the clone sample if you will, from Attack of the Clones. Disney have unfortunately retconned that. They've said no, that's not how it happened, even though that was a story, that George Lucas oversaw, was developed by LucasArts. ILM did the cutscenes for that, but Disney said no, it's not a movie, so it doesn't count. So that's in there as well. And what's the other one? Super Star Wars. So the Super Nintendo game got a port to the PlayStation 4. Now that's included. So I said there's a lot of these games in there where it's been, they're games that have been available, elsewhere that are now included. But these aren't PS2 games. These are PS4 versions of PS2 games. And this is where things are a little trickier with this service. A lot of them, Toy Story 2 from the PS1, it's not marked as a PS1 game. It's marked as a PlayStation 4/PlayStation 5 game because that's what you can play it on. You can play it on either platform, which is fine. I have no issue with that. I just wish they were a little smoother with their, presentation, if you will, of, what is a PS1 game, what is a PS2 game, what is a PSP game. Patapon is in there, Patapon 2. They're PlayStation portable games, so PSP games, but they're not branded as PSP games. And this is where I think Sony needs to fix that up. It would essentially be the same as with Nintendo with their, NES and Super NES and Nintendo 64 apps, just saying they're all Switch games because you're playing them on a Switch, which is not the case. We do know that there's a lot of games available. The NTSC games are coming as well. So I will say this, and this is probably going to be controversial to anyone that hears this, but if you're someone who grew up with PAL and now you're bitching and moaning that you don't get NTSC, you need to shut up. PAL is the region of TVs that Australia used to have. NTSC is the type of TVs that America had. Now for Australia, PAL was the region requirement for Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, which is why a lot of games had to be, we had to wait till Europe got them before we got them, which is how we got included in that whole, they're a part of Europe thing. So it's part of that whole process, that's how we got included. Now, what it is with the PAL format is that they ran at 50 hertz, and the NTSC games, the American versions, ran at 60 hertz. That was a requirement of the time when these consoles were around before HD, because that was how the technology for the televisions was developed for those regions. So it's literally a leftover requirement of PS1 games from day one having been 50 hertz here in Australia and 60 hertz in the US. It's not a PlayStation thing. Nintendo 64 games have it as well. Super Nintendo games have it as well. Sega Mega Drive games have it. It's very much a product of the time. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is stupid that people get so upset about this is, for years, if you were playing these games on the hardware, you were playing them in 50 hertz mode, right? Some games offered, like in the GameCube and PlayStation 2 days, some games would offer the ability to run it at 60 hertz. But not all of them. It wasn't a requirement. It's not a mandatory thing. You offer both. So a lot of people who grew up on PlayStation 1 here in Australia got shitty when they announced that it was going to be the European PAL versions of these games coming here. Now, I know Digital Foundry did a deep dive into a few things about how some the artifacts from the video files, they're dropping frames to keep up with the modern day PlayStation 5 hardware and things like that. That's fine. They have to make these decisions. We've seen it with Nintendo with their Nintendo 64 app. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time released as part of it. Many people consider that to be one of the best games ever made, and it is a good game. But it had issues galore with the emulation. It wasn't perfect, but Nintendo fixed it. Sony's effort just seems to be, fine, you don't like the PAL, we'll give you the NTSC games. Now, I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm not saying this is how it has to be for all these things. I'm just saying if you grew up playing 50 hertz games, don't complain that you get 50 hertz games, right? It'd be like saying you grew up, everything in black and white, and you're getting everything in black and white again, and that's how you remember it. That's how your brain remembers these things. And and instead of black and white, someone else is getting sepia, and you're complaining about that. I've never been one to notice frame drops and things like that when I'm playing games. Obviously, if it's a massive frame drop, then I do. But if something's supposed to run at 30 frames and it's running at 29, I don't notice that. It never bothers me. So maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not the audience that cares about this. But I just think it's one of those things that people are complaining about when they really shouldn't be. We do know that it is coming. There's no date on when these games will be available. We don't know if it's going to be a one or the other option. Like in the Nintendo 64 app for on the Switch, you can go in and say no, only give me the NTSC version, or only give me the PAL, or give me both. Right? You can't just say give me only PAL. It's either all of them or only NTSC. Who knows why they've done it that way, but they have. So I think again, the library of games is very, very cool. I'm not saying that we're going to have the full. It's not going to be 400 games out, within the next week. But, it's one of those things where there's a lot in there. We just have to wait and see how it's all going to shake out. And at the moment, there's not enough value there for me to say to other people, hey, you should upgrade. If there were more, PlayStation original titles from the PS1 and PS2, platforms in there, then I'd say, yeah, sure, go for it. But if we look in, the PS2 stuff, God of War 3 Remastered's there, which is a PS3, it's a PS4 version of a PS3 game, but neither God of War 1 or 2 are there, and none of the PSP games are there either. So that's sort of where my issue with this is lying, is that, Nintendo have done it as well. They're giving us the sequels to games, but not giving us the first ones. So it just seems like it's badly thought out. But PlayStation were kind enough to give me a couple of months access. I'm going to put it through its paces over the next week or so. See how it goes with the downloading of the games. See how the older games run, all that sort of stuff. We'll come back next week with some more on it. But it is a very big thing that they're doing it. As I said earlier, the Ubisoft Plus is part of this. So Ubisoft Plus is the Ubisoft what's the word? The subscription service. That they now offer. We've had it for they've had it on PC for a while. There was somewhere else for it. Ubisoft Connect. Sorry, they keep changing the name on it. So it's called Ubisoft Connect on their page, but when you go to it, it's Ubisoft Plus on the thing. So yeah, Ubisoft Plus. It's been on PC for a while. It's now on PlayStation. It's basically just including a bunch of titles. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Extraction, Breakpoint, Far Cry 6. It's all there. You get season passes and expansions from older titles. You don't get all the season pass stuff for Valhalla, but you get all the season pass stuff for, say, Odyssey. And it's essentially not all of the Ubisoft titles, but it's a massive chunk of Ubisoft titles. So if you're someone that loves your Tom Clancy games, this is probably something that's going to suit you. Like The Crew 2 is included in the the PS4 library, and that's just celebrating 4 years of content. And when I say 4 years of content, I mean like every 3 months they drop a big expansion of new cars and maps and missions and all sorts of stuff. So there's definitely a lot going on for that one as well. But so it's something to sort of pay attention to. And that really is PlayStation Plus. We'll have more to say about it next week. Hopefully, they release sort of an idea of how the library's going to grow as well. Because they promised 400 games and they've announced like 100 of them. So yeah. Right, moving on before we wrap up for this week, let's talk about the games that are coming out over the next 7 days. So the next 7 days being obviously June 25th onwards. There are games obviously did release. There are games that did release today. So the Capcom Fighting Collection released on all consoles and PC, and that just is 10 classic Capcom fighting games in another collection. This is like their 9th collection at the moment. Capcom love doing these things. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes released for Switch as well. And AI The Somnium Files also released for PC, Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. But over the next couple of days, over the next week or so, there's not really a lot coming. June 30th, we'll see the release of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, the big expansion for that game for both Switch and PC. Interestingly, for Switch players, the update that includes it will be forced onto everyone, but then you have to unlock the DLC by buying it. It's like a 1 megabyte patch, which is something that Capcom did back with Resident Evil 5. They put bonus content on the disc. We basically just bought the license to access it, so it's a similar sort of thing. The update itself, though, is like 13.1 gigabytes, and the base game itself is like 9 gigabytes. So the actual update is larger than the actual base game, which is a very rare thing to see. Also next Friday, we'll see the release of F1 22 for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. If you do pre-order that, though, and order the Champions Edition, which is like the digital deluxe version of it, you actually get 3 days early access, so you can actually jump in on the 28th and start racing that one. There've been, a couple of big changes with that. So a bunch of tracks have been overhauled. The game now sports the hybrid F1 cars, which are part electric, part petrol powered. There's full VR support, so you can actually literally sit in the cockpit of an F1 car and race around. Please don't confuse F1 22 with F1 Manager 22, which is coming out in August. That is the manager simulator for that. You don't get to race that, you just get to oversee all the aspects of racing. So if you want to race F1 cars, F1 22 next week. If you want to control the racing of F1 cars, F1 Manager 22 at the end of August. But that brings us to the end of another show. We'll be back next Friday for another episode. And until then, happy gaming.